when Marcus Langston, the newly appointed chief of police, found himself handcuffed by his own officers in front of a growing crowd. He did not resist. He didn't shout. He didn't fight back. He understood in that moment that the racial bias and deep-rooted hatred infecting the system were no longer abstract theories. They were painfully, devastatingly real. Without a single question asked, without a shadow of doubt in their minds, his officers had assumed he was a criminal. But instead of seeking revenge, Marcus made a different choice. He decided to change the system from within, no matter how long it took or how hard it would be. What followed would shock even those hardened by years of witnessing injustice and brutality. But to understand how it all began, we need to go back to the start of that day. A walk through Lincoln Heights. Marcus Langston had only recently been appointed as the head of the Lincoln Heights Police Precinct. A man of quiet confidence and deep conviction, he believed leadership wasn't something you did from behind a desk. So he chose to walk the streets of his new community in plain clothes, with no badge, no gun, no escort, just himself. The day was warm, the sun casting a soft golden light over the cracked sidewalks and weathered brick buildings. Children played stickball in narrow alleys. Old men sat on porches, their conversations floating lazily on the breeze. It was peaceful in a way, but Marcus knew peace was often fragile. He was here to understand the neighborhood firsthand, not just its beauty, but its fears, its tensions, and its truths. As he strolled past a faded blue sedan parked by the curb, Marcus noticed a black and white patrol car pulling to a slow stop at the corner. From it stepped Officer Ryan Keller, a young man who was new to the force and still finding his footing. Ryan's stride was confident, but his eyes flickered with the kind of nervous energy that made Marcus wary. "Hey, you," Ryan called out. "Stop for a second." Marcus turned slowly, keeping his hands visible. He could sense the tension radiating off the officer, like a taut wire waiting to snap. "Good afternoon," Marcus said calmly. "Is there a problem?" "Let me see your ID," Ryan demanded. His tone wasn't aggressive, but it carried an undercurrent of assumption. In his mind, Marcus wasn't a man out for a walk. He was a suspect. "I'm just walking," Marcus replied. Still, he handed over his ID without argument. "I'm new in the area, just getting to know the neighborhood." Ryan wasn't listening. He already had a narrative in his head. His suspicion thickened like fog. "Hands on the hood," Ryan ordered, reaching for his handcuffs. Marcus's pulse quickened. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to assert authority or demand respect. He placed his palms on the warm metal of the car hood, knowing full well what was coming next. Ryan patted him down with practiced efficiency, but little respect. His suspicion deepened with every empty pocket. "Stolen car," Ryan muttered, half to himself. "I haven't stolen anything," Marcus said quietly. "Tell it to the judge," Ryan snapped. A small group of people had started to gather, drawn by the sight of a black man being frisked by a white cop. Some looked curious, others weary. A few raised their phones, recording silently. Marcus noticed them, but he kept his focus on Ryan. It was surreal. Just an hour earlier, he had been in his office, reviewing department strategy. Now he was being treated as a suspect by his own officers, because of his skin color, his plain clothes, and an all-too-familiar set of assumptions. A second patrol car arrived. Out stepped Sergeant Cole Mathis, a seasoned officer known for his strict adherence to protocol. But not today. Cole took one look at Marcus and saw only what he expected to see. "We're cuffing him," Cole said flatly to Ryan, not bothering to check Marcus's ID or ask a single question. "I can explain who I am," Marcus said. His voice remained calm, but his wrists were already being locked into the cold bite of steel. The murmurs from the crowd swelled. Some gasped. Others shook their heads. "I have the right to make a phone call," Marcus said, once again controlling his emotions, even as humiliation burned through him like wildfire. After a pause, Cole gave a reluctant nod. Ryan handed Marcus his phone. With steady hands, Marcus dialed a number. On the other end, it was picked up on the first ring. "This is Langston," he said. "I need you at Lake and Pine immediately. I've been detained." The man on the other end was Deputy Chief Isaiah Moore, his right-hand officer, who wasted no time asking questions. He understood the gravity of the situation without being told. Isaiah was already in his cruiser, speeding toward the intersection. The moment of reckoning. Minutes later, Isaiah's patrol car screeched to a halt. He sprang from the vehicle, his heart pounding as he took in the scene. There, in plain view of a growing crowd, stood his boss, handcuffed, flanked by two officers who had no idea who they had just arrested. "What the hell is this?" Isaiah barked. Ryan and Cole froze, their faces paling as the realization set in. "Take the cuffs off him. Now," Isaiah ordered, his voice low but dangerous. Ryan's hands shook as he fumbled with the key. The cuffs clattered to the ground as they were removed. Marcus flexed his wrists gently, but said nothing. "You know who you just arrested?" Isaiah demanded, his eyes burning holes through them. Ryan swallowed hard. I didn't know." "You arrested the chief of police," Isaiah said. "And you didn't even check his ID." The weight of their mistakes settled over Ryan and Cole like lead. But Marcus, standing tall despite everything, didn't explode in anger. He didn't curse or shout. Instead, he looked at them with a measured calm that was somehow more unsettling. "I think we need to talk," Marcus said quietly. A new kind of leadership. The next morning, Marcus called an emergency meeting of the entire precinct. Every officer, from the rookies to the veterans, filled the conference room. They knew what had happened. Some were ashamed. Others were nervous. And everyone wondered what Marcus was going to do. He stood before them, hands clasped in front of him. His voice was calm but firm. "Let's talk about what happened yesterday," he began. "Not because I want to punish anyone, but because we need to understand." There was no rage in his tone. No accusation. Only truth. "Officer Keller did what many officers have done in his place," Marcus said. "He acted on instinct, on bias. And because of that, we have a problem." Ryan Keller sat in the front row, his hands clenched on his knees. Marcus turned his gaze toward him, not with hostility, but with something closer to understanding. "This isn't just about you, Ryan," Marcus continued. "This is about all of us. About a system that teaches us to fear first and think later." He spoke about the dangers of systemic bias, how it corrodes trust between officers and the communities they serve, how it damages not just individuals, but the very foundation of justice. "We swore an oath to protect and serve," Marcus said, "but we can't protect people we see as threats. We can't serve people we don't trust." The room was silent. No one shifted in their seat. No one looked away. "This isn't about politics," Marcus went on. "It's about people. We have to be better, not just because it's the law, but because it's right." A turning point. Marcus didn't fire Ryan Keller. He didn't suspend Sergeant Mathis. Instead, he required them, and every officer in the precinct, to undergo an intensive training program focused on bias recognition, de-escalation tactics, and community engagement. It wasn't a punishment. It was a new standard. Slowly, things began to change. Officers who had once dismissed concerns about racial profiling started to listen. Foot patrols increased. Conversations with community leaders became more frequent. Trust, though fragile, began to rebuild. And as for Marcus Langston, he didn't carry the bitterness of that day on Lake and Pine. But he carried the lesson. And he made sure every officer under his command carried it, too. In the end, what had begun as an act of humiliation became the catalyst for transformation. Not through vengeance, but through courage, patience, and a relentless commitment to justice.